Welcome to the Deacs.AI podcast, where Wake Forest innovators unpack the real-world magic of artificial intelligence through candid conversations. I'm Michael Ferrari.
I'm Ryan Scholl.
Please join us as we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming work across campus, one fascinating story at a time. Get ready to discover the human side of technological innovation. On this episode, we are joined by Betsy Barre, Assistant Provost and Executive Director of the Center for Advancement of Teaching. Join us for a conversation with Betsy as we explore the messy, nuanced relationship between advanced digital cognition and the human educational process. From the temptation of effortless answers to the profound need for deep analytical engagement, this conversation goes beyond the surface to ask, how do we cultivate robust comprehension in an age of intelligent systems?
Okay, we're back again with the Deacs.AI podcast. Michael Ferrari, the fastest man in web development. Thank you. Michael, we have Betsy Barre with us, the Executive Director of the Center for Advancement of Teaching here at Wake Forest. I think your title probably says it all when it comes to artificial intelligence. Now, I think, does your business card actually have Queen of AI on it?
It does not. No,
Okay.
no. Yes, thank goodness.
I think, like many of us at Wake Forest, you were probably our introduction to this generative artificial intelligence boom. And I know for me, I remember sitting in some of your earlier sessions. How did you jump into it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it is interesting that in higher ed, at least, a lot of the people who were first engaged with this were teaching centers. Because you might think, well, it's technology, so it should be IT folks. But I
No,
think
it's not.
it was faculty very quickly realizing, this is going to change how we teach. And so it's not an accident that most of the first things written about AI in the Atlantic or the New York Times, et cetera, were about the cheating apocalypse, or what's going to, what's going to happen if this tool can write papers, how is that going to change school?
Yeah.
So very quickly, teaching centers had to get engaged. But personally, what happened for me it was actually in November of 22 that I first learned about it. So it's now been, 2.5 years. So it was before we went home for a winter break. One of my colleagues in the library, Kyle Denlinger, who, if you're listening and you're a Wake person, you know Kyle. He's an open education librarian and digital pedagogy librarian. He sent just a G-chat to everyone in the faculty comments that said, look at this, look what I made with this new tool, ChatGPT, and it was an entire syllabus.
Wow. Yeah.
So it wasn't like a lot of people get the first taste of like, just ask it a quick question.
Yeah.
He decided to go big.
And that was back, we're talking about 3.0, 3.5.
Definitely 3.
Yeah.
Definitely 3. I mean, maybe even 2. No, it was 3. What was crazy about it was not only was it a whole syllabus, it was like a unique syllabus and a very niche. It wasn't like intro to biology. It was critical library pedagogy. And it had books that were correct that you should use in that class. And it had assignments and it had learning outcomes and it had a schedule. And I just remember stopping and thinking, oh boy. And I I got to pay attention to this. And I actually knew a little bit because my background's in philosophy. So I follow philosophy blogs, and so philosophers, for obvious reasons, are interested in large language models because they study language and they're also interested in consciousness and philosophy of mind. And so I knew about ChatGPT or GPTs, but there was no way for the public to really get access to it. So I was just reading them talking about what they could do.
Exactly.
And so once I could get access to it, I thought, and I started playing around with it, I lost my whole winter break. And my family was like, what's that? My family, they're all educators and they're all K-12 educators. So I got them engaged very early as well. My brother's a principal. And so I've had visits to his school to talk with the teachers in his school about it very early on. So so I got started then. And I think for me, because I was obviously interested for our faculty, thinking about how we're going to adjust to this, but also I'm just philosophically interested in it. So it was also something I was willing and eager to read about. So long answer, but a fun story. A fun story that I think a lot of us will be telling our stories of when did you first use ChatGPT?
And that's why we like to ask a lot of guests that just to kind of set the stage.
Yeah.
I follow a lot of the industry trends. Generative AI is incredibly polarizing in many industries. The pendulum is shifting now. We're going from a little less apprehension to a little more excitement. But especially in the early days in the education world, there was a lot of apprehension. I think most people's sentiment almost immediately was the students can use it for cheating. That's the only thing. Obviously, your story about Kyle is fantastic. He used it for something, more productive.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that he was actually going to use that syllabus, just to be clear. He just wanted to see what it could do.
But that was it. Instead of producing a paper,
right?
So I guess how did you see, from those early sessions you ran, the mentality of people going from, oh my God, this is going to completely screw up students, to, hey, I think we can do some stuff with this.
I mean, I'm not sure actually, I'm not sure that's where we are right now either. So I should say, I think it swings back. And I don't think swing is even the right way to, I've used that language before, so I understand why you're using that language. But it's, I think they're just different. What happens at different periods is we're interested in different questions, and we have different complex answers to those questions. And it's not like pro or con. It's like, this is really messy. And so I think in the early days, and I think this is still somewhat true, but not as much anymore, people they hadn't had any experience with it. And so it was a kind of fear, doubt, or just like, I'm not even going to deal with it. I think that's what we saw a lot of, is like, there was a ton of people who they weren't necessarily apprehensive. It was just like, I don't want to deal with this or think about it. They're busy. I think we've gotten more folks to now know about it, and I think there are people who are interested in thinking about ways it could potentially be useful. But I think now there are people who know about it and who are opposed to it. And so that's a more, at least in certain ways in higher education, because I think you can have all of those things being true at the same time, that there are ways that it could potentially be used to help student learning. And at the same time, there are ways that it could be really bad for student learning. So you don't have to pick one, right? And so what we want, ideally in higher ed, is that we have complex positions on these things, that we say yes and, that yes, it could be dangerous for cheating, right? Like, and actually that's academic dishonesty and just a problem in terms of our assessment security. It also could be problematic for student learning. I think that's a thing that we're starting to talk about and hear about more, is that students aren't trying to cheat. They're using it in a way that they think is helpful for their learning, but it's actually undermining their learning. And they don't know that because they don't know how their learning works. Sure. And sometimes faculty don't know how learning works. And so faculty could be encouraging a kind of use that actually makes things worse. And so the thing I often say is that the reason we need to be paying attention to this is it's still new. 2.5 years feels like it's been a long time, but it's still very new. It's changing all the time. So we need to do research. We actually need to see what is helping in the classroom instead of just theorizing, which is basically what we're doing right now. Is we're like, well, given what I know about learning, that seems helpful, or that wouldn't be helpful, or that would, but let's test it. Like, let's actually have a class that's using it and a class that's not using it, and have like random controls and see how learning improves in different contexts. And so until we have a lot of good empirical evidence, I think it's useful for all of us to say, well, let's keep, the jury is out. We're cautiously engaging and experimenting is the way I would put it. And I think that's true with all pedagogy, is we should be experimenting, but not be raw advocates or immediately hostile no matter what, like complete skeptics. I think neither of those approaches are really helpful, because you're starting with your conclusion before you've even looked at the evidence or thought in a complex way.
One of the favorite quotes that goes around a lot of the AI higher education blogs or thing is, use it for the process, not the product.
Yeah.
Okay. But I also am hearing you say, even using it for the process, we don't know what the benefits or the possible, detriments, because even during that process could potentially affect student learning as well.
Right. And it's the thing I would say is often the process product is a useful distinction that I could talk more about, but it's really, when people use the word use, there's so, as you know, if you quote unquote used AI, like they're not even in the same ballpark, the different ways you could use AI. Like there's it's like, how do you use a friend? Right? Like, how do you use a teacher? Right? Like a lot of different ways that I'm going to talk to my colleagues or
I use my friends in all different ways.
Well, fair enough, right? I got to end there, right? So, but I mean, like, I can make use of a person, and that's the thing. Like, we don't want to anthropomorphize AI, but it is true, and I agree with folks who say that it can be helpful to think about it more as a person than a machine in this sense, only in this sense, not in like, it's going to be my boyfriend, I'm going to fall in love with it, et cetera. That's dangerous.
We'll talk about that in another podcast.
That's really good. I actually think that's a big issue that we should talk about.
That's
But thinking about it as a person is helpful and not a machine, because I think when we think about a machine, we think of it like a calculator, and that's a bad analogy. You could talk about why I think it's a bad analogy. Is that you ask it a question and it gives you this perfect answer. Whereas instead, if you think about it as a conversation partner, you have much better outcomes, right? So I agree with that, which means that I think we need to think about AI in that way, and just realizing that the uses of, like, if I were thinking about how can I learn from my colleague, I'm going to ask them, like, there's lots of different ways I can learn from my colleagues. It's not, there's not one way of quote unquote using my colleagues to learn. So I think, so to go back to your question, which was about process versus product, I think there's lots of different ways of using it. And we need to get into the weeds of that. Yeah. And students need to understand that there are different uses, and different uses can be helpful or detrimental. And the most important thing for students to understand, and this is true for faculty too, is that there is no universal position on what is and is not useful. And
I do want to touch on that.
So maybe I should wait. But basically, because it depends on what you're trying to do. It depends on what you're trying to do. So if my goal is to learn how to play the piano, I have to practice the piano. If my goal is to create a cool song, like, I don't need to, whatever, I can just have AI do the piano, right? Like, so what is your goal? Is my goal to learn how to brainstorm ideas? If so, you do not use AI to help you brainstorm ideas, because your goal is to learn how to do that yourself. If your goal is to learn how to edit a paper, you don't use AI to edit the paper. I mean, so it's that kind of,
So I have this topic buried way down.
Okay, sorry.
I want to pull this up. Do you see, and we'll get back to the students in a second, but do you see a big difference how, let's say, somebody who's not in school would use generative AI to learn something? For instance, I've talked many times on this, how I use it to learn things all the time.
Yeah.
Whether I want a quick answer or I want to learn about something, versus what a student would do in their course of study to master something or learn.
Well, the distinction I draw is between learning and working, not between learning outside of school and learning inside of school.
Okay.
I would actually think, and I think, well, there's no one policing you. You can do whatever you want to learn whatever you want. But I actually think if you want to learn a skill, the same thing I'm going to tell you applies to you in your life as well. Yeah. So it might be easy and it might feel like I'm learning when I'm like, oh, it's teaching me how to do this skill. And there's a lot of research that shows that we often are not aware. We think we've learned when we haven't. If you ask, if you survey people and say, like, was that a good learning experience? People will say, yes, I learned so much. And then you actually test them.
But they didn't retain it.
Or they
don't have mastery.
Right. Or that's a good way to put it. But basically it depends on whether you're talking about skills or knowledge as well. Okay. There's different kinds of things usually the only way you know if somebody has knowledge is you ask them to do something, which is a skill, right? You ask them to apply it. And so when you know you didn't really learn it is when I say, can you explain this to somebody else? Or can you write, and very quickly you're like, oh shoot, because it felt good coming down. Like I was reading all about, I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then when I actually have to teach someone, I'm like, oh, I don't actually know this thing. And so I think in the work context, and myself too, to be clear, I use AI quite a bit. I'm conflicted about it in a lot of ways, but I use it a lot.
Interesting.
I use it to learn, but I also know that if I really want to learn something, I know how learning works. And that's because of my job, right? Which is that I can't just it's not, and this is true for faculty too, and for higher ed for a long time, we've taught in ways that aren't most beneficial to learning, which is a straight lecture is not the best way for for anyone to learn.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like I'm learning. So I'm like, oh, all this information, write it down.
You are hitting my hot button right now.
Yeah. Like I'm writing it all down. I get it. But the best way to learn is to actually have to do something and to see where you don't understand things and to practice and to get confused and to fail and to say, wait, I got to figure this out. And so I know if I want to learn something, I actually have to test myself or talk to somebody else about it. I have to do flashcards. That's how you learn it, even though it feels like I'm learning it by just asking ChatGPT.
Everything you just mentioned are great use cases.
Absolutely.
To use.
Yes. That's the point. That's exactly right.
Use these generative AI tools as a study partner.
That's right.
As a personal tutor.
Right. So I think, yes. So that's why I'm always like, don't talk about use. Yeah. Because if I am using it to help test me, if I am using it to actually do things that we know work for learning, which is not just giving me the answer,
Correct.
incidentally, or just writing the paper, right?
I actually built something for my kids that I'm going to talk about in another episode. But I specifically put in the instructions, do not give me the answer.
Right.
Like I put that in bold.
So I also think, it's also worth saying, because I think some people there's a lot of people who are skeptical of AI. The first thing they go to is that it makes mistakes and it's not good. And I think that there are definitely cases where I definitely, and most right now, it like gets us 80% there. Even for these study tutors and things, it gets us 80% there to what a human would do. And so I acknowledge that but I think two things. One, it will get better. I think there's pretty much no question that it will get better. And two, I really like Ethan Mullick's sort of framing of this, where he says, the question is not, is it better than a human? The question is it better than the best available human?
Like that.
So if a student is at midnight and I'm not available.
And there's only one of you.
Yeah, there's only one of you. Or, what are they typically going to do in that context? They're either going to just circle and spiral about their own lack of knowledge because they don't know what to do or freak out. Or they're going to wake up their roommate and ask their roommate. And I am pretty sure most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, AI is better if you give it the right prompts than their friend, right? Now, in certain senses. So I want to say in terms of like understanding learning theory but there is a real benefit that is lost if we lose actual human to human relationships, etc., which we might get to as well.
Again,
okay, all right.
Back and forth.
I will stop and we can move in your order. Sorry about that.
But there's a topic that you briefly touched on that I think it's going to set off a time bomb here. But in this new generative AI world we live in, ways of assessing students must be redesigned. How do you, what tips do you see? How do you see that coming? Because we have to think of new ways to understand a student's mastery of a subject. No longer can we rely on just turning this paper. Do you see testing a student's mastery or knowledge changing?
I think a lot of people will say like, oh, you just got to be a better teacher and get creative. And one of the things I often say is that there is not a good answer to this question. We have not figured this out yet. And in fact, I think this is why it is a real crisis. It really, so as much as I love AI and think AI can definitely help learning, and I think it's really interesting and I read about it, I do think that there is a crisis in assessment because there's only so much you can do to change your assessment, to assess certain kinds of things, right? So I can say, and I think actually, assessment security is important, and there's a new book out called The Opposite of Cheating that I highly recommend to folks to get. And it's about assessment and academic integrity in the age of AI. And they have a whole chapter on assessment, integrity, and security. Like, how do you make sure that you are assessing the students and not AI? Because if there is a skill you want them to learn that is independent of AI. So maybe you have a course where I don't care if they know how to do things independent of AI. I'm teaching a business class. I want to know how they use AI. That's easy. But I do not believe, and so maybe this is where I would disagree with some people. I think there are plenty of things we want humans to learn how to do on their own. We want them to know how to do some things on their own. We want them to know some knowledge on their own. Plenty of things we want to see how they learn and integrate AI, how they critique AI, all of that stuff I don't disagree with. But I think it seems, to me at least, it's pretty obvious that there are some things that we want students to learn how to do on their own. If that's the case, we have to be able to assess whether they can do it on their own. And so we have to do that, I think, in person right now is the only real solution to that. And in person in a variety of ways. So it could be oral exams, it could be the Blue Book
I was
test.
just going to ask my next question was, do we have to go back to Blue Book?
Yeah. And there are downsides to this. I want to be clear because a lot of people early on will say, but that's bad because of, for accessibility reasons or students who don't test well. Like, we were so glad to get away from that in higher ed, and now we're going back to that. And so I don't disagree with that, but I think it's even worse if we don't actually assess students' actual independent learning and abilities. So we need some way to actually be able to assess their learning and their abilities. And so I think oral exams, Blue Books, oral exams only possible for tiny classes because there's only so much time. So I think the problem is, and this is why I say it's crisis, is that there are some things that we want students to learn that cannot be assessed in 1 hour or an hour and a
Fair
half,
enough.
that take a week.
Yeah.
So I think it is valuable for students to learn how to, on their own, go through the whole process of writing a paper that might take 2 weeks. That's something that
Now, when you say on their own,
completely on their own.
you can't use AI as a partner
Right.
there to brainstorm,
Right.
to give you
Right.
an outline.
Right.
To
I mean, and again, there's value for that too. But
Mhm.
I think it's valuable for students to learn how to do all of that on their own. Now, we could have an interesting argument about why I think that's the case. But I can't assess that in class writing, because I want to see them revise. I want them to learn how to revise, how to work with their ideas, there's no way for me to do that in person unless I say, you sit in here for a week like it's a prison and we're going to have you do it. It's so artificial.
Yeah. Mhm.
The same thing is true about reading. Reading is my biggest stress, right? My biggest stress is that I want students to learn how to read on their own. There is no way I guess I could just have them read in class. And I'm going to start doing that, actually, I think in the fall, doing some in-class reading.
Okay.
Because they're not reading. They're having AI read for them.
Exactly.
And this is actually far, 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 far bigger deal in my mind than having AI write for them.
When you say read for them, do you mean read and summarize or convert to audio?
Read and summarize.
Mm.
Because they don't like reading anyway. This has been a classic thing for students for millennia, I feel like, is that they're assigning.
I'm raising
reading.
my hand right now. I'm one of them. I hate reading.
Right. And so, but we have lots of research that reading is one of the most powerful things you can do for learning, and specifically reading a paper text in some ways, even more than digital text. But reading on the page versus audio actually helps you process and reflect on the information in a way that's different.
As much as I hate reading,
Yes.
I do not disagree with that
Yeah.
statement.
Yeah. Interesting, right?
Because when I actually I've listened to a ton of audio.
Yeah, me too.
And there are articles that I know I will say I can't listen to it because I want to read it.
Yes.
Because I will retain more. I will understand it.
And there's lots of interesting debate about the digital versus paper, and then but that one's more complicated because it does seem clear, they've done empirical tests, that reading on paper you retain more than reading digitally. But the reason for that, it appears, is that we've just been so socialized and trained that when we're reading on the internet, it's like fast.
Yeah.
So some people have argued if we could retrain students to read the digital stuff and the way they read the paper, then maybe it's fine. But it is clear that the reading on paper reading words, right, on the page, or whether it's digital on the screen, is different than listening. And I listen too, because you have to make choices, and sometimes
There's not enough hours in a day.
So, but I do think that I love that you said it's hard, but I agree with that statement. Like, I don't like it, but I agree with that statement. And I think that's really powerful, because one of the things that I've been reading about reading, and one of the important insights about this is that, I know,
That's a rabbit hole right there.
but one important insight from the literature on this, and I'm like, it's so obvious when you reflect on it, you're like, duh, but most of us don't think about this, is that reading is not something natural. We were not born biologically to read.
Mhm.
Biologically, language comes to us,
Okay.
like language, speaking, right? But reading is like a human invention. Like, so you have to be taught how to read in kindergarten, right? Like, reading is not something that we're just like naturally learning how to do. And so it's really hard. Like, we have to decode all those little letters. I mean, if you think about all that goes into reading, now we do it naturally now. We don't have to decode each letter.
Yeah.
We don't have to put the sentences together. We're trying to get to a point where we can do deep reading and understand the ideas, but it is it is hard. And one of the things that people have said is that the reason why you learn so much from reading is because it's hard. It slows you down. So all this thing that we love about the speed
Definitely slows
Absolutely,
me down.
yes,
Trust me.
yeah. I determined I can't do audiobooks, for
Yeah,
instance.
okay.
Like, I tried a couple of times. I tried listening to a few books, and
Yeah.
what I would always find is, like, I have no idea what I just listened to.
Interesting.
Like,
Okay.
I think part of it too is when it's so easy now.
Yeah.
Like, when you're listening, just like, oh, I could do the laundry or something
Yes.
while I listen to this. So I just can't do it. I tried listening
interesting.
to
Nuclear
a couple of Stephen
opposite.
King books. Could tell you maybe 2 plot points from the entire book.
Yeah.
I go through 50 books a year at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just audio.
See, I can't
See, I'm a-
retain any of it.
Because I don't have the time.
Yeah.
I don't sit down.
Yeah.
I don't have the time to sit and open something. I'm always ingesting my information. I don't even call it reading anymore.
Yeah.
I'm ingesting information.
But are you really ingesting it?
Well, that's a good point, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
maybe I'm not getting 100%.
Right, you're getting,
maybe I'm
but maybe it's better than nothing.
75% or something.
Right.
I do it while I'm running.
Yeah.
Out walking the dog.
Yeah.
Stuff would be like, I can't, I'm not going to have a novel out there while I'm, walking the dog.
Right.
But-
Right. And so part of it is so I think both of these things are true, is figuring out what is the purpose of this task like. But I do worry that because there's so much that's accessible in audio or
Mhm.
there's so much information and people are trying to get as much information in as possible, that we have downplayed the value of the slow read.
Mhm.
That, and even like all this stuff about speed reading, which psychologists will tell you is not possible, incidentally. Like you cannot actually do that.
Now that I believe.
Yeah, you cannot actually do it. You can do it, but the relationship between retention and speed is like perfectly linear. So yeah, you can speed read, but you don't remember everything, or you don't retain it. And so it's helping students understand the value of the slow read, because I can't and higher ed, this is a big thing too. Higher ed is built, the model of higher ed versus K through 12. This is important because AI is stressful for all teachers, but it's a real challenge for higher ed because higher ed assumes that most of your learning will happen outside of class. So if you think about it, higher ed, you are only in class for like 10 to 15 hours a week, but you're supposed to be full time. Like you're supposed to be spending 45 hours a week learning. And the assumption is that as an adult, you're going to do your own learning and you're going to do all the rating and you're going to do all the research. And then you're just going to come to class to get not the main event. The classes are actually not the main event in the way that higher ed was built. So if students can now take all of their outside work and just have AI do it, and they're only really getting independent practice in 15 hours a week, they're going to learn dramatically less.
Mhm.
And I have heard from faculty who have had some unintentional and that's a really important thing to say, is it's not necessarily, there are students who are cheating, who are like, I know my professor wouldn't want this. I'm totally going to have AI write this paper for me. No question that happens. But I think there's a lot of students who think they are doing things that are helping them that actually aren't. And I think, and the faculty don't realize that it's a bad thing either. So they don't even say you can't do it that way until they get the final exams back. And they're like, my final exams are worse than they've ever been in 10 years.
So I want to jump to this next topic because you're dancing around it.
Yeah.
You've gone all over, but you haven't said it yet.
Okay.
Students are completely confused.
Yeah.
I've heard it a little bit from Wake Students. I've heard it a lot from some other conferences I've been to or participated or webinars. Students are confused not only by just their own knowledge of what is cheating, what's not, but even the differences in policies from one teacher to the next, or the school policies. So I know you were part of, crafting our academic policy.
I don't even think it's called a policy, just
guidelines. Guidelines. You're right. But even with the guidelines, each professor may have individual, let's just call them, I don't know, paragraphs built in to their, their class notes or their syllabus or whatever. So what do the students do?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to get a little meta and not even talk about AI. So I'm going to come back. If I don't come back to bring me back to this, first of all, I think there's no question that descriptively that's true, that students are confused and stressed. And obviously there's things that we can do more to help on that front. But I think it has always been the case. Back when I was in school, on my day, walking up hills both ways,
in the snow,
that professors do things radically differently across courses and disciplines. Radically differently.
That's a good point.
And
different disciplines.
And not just different disciplines, but just do you, how you even structure your syllabus? When do you give out assignments? Are they due before or after? Blah, blah, blah. And so I think part of the reason why the anxiety level, this is why I'm getting really meta here, is actually not specifically about AI. It's that, and there's some empirical evidence about this, there's some debate about this, but it seems as if, and this is like a broad claim, so I'm sure anytime you make a big broad claim like this, there are exceptions, but that there has been a cultural shift in how we raise children to give them all sorts of checklists of here, step by step by step by step by step by step. And so they're used to having everything exactly laid out for them.
Yes.
And so they're getting anxious, not just about AI, but if they don't have a perfect rubric for how things are going to be graded, if they don't have, tell me what's next from the OPCD, or how do I get this and what's the steps here? Or I don't they're very uncomfortable with ambiguity. They're uncomfortable with complexity. And
we had another professor actually talk about that in one episode.
Yeah. So I think, and I think there's I sometimes think faculty will use that to just be like, I don't have to give them any expectations. And I don't want to say that. I'm not trying to say that. I think there's actually research that the more we explain the unwritten rules, the more that we advance equity too, because the students who don't know the unwritten rules are like, oh, now I get it. So I do think we should be clear in our expectations, but I also think sometimes it is useful for us to tell students part of being adult is realizing, and not just being an adult, but moving into the world, is that you're going to be in different environments where people have different expectations of you.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Because even with my work I've been doing what I do since I was 15. It's like I would run into all different types of clients. Like I know there's people where it's like, hey, this is what I need, and I could do it, and they'll be like, awesome.
Yeah.
And then there's other ones where I know every step of the way I need to check with them and like, is this okay? So that exactly like what you were saying before about like the learning to learn, understanding learning. I think there's a lesson in and of this too as well, where it's like different people are going to have different expectations.
Toughen up, right?
Yeah.
But in fairness to the students, right? I mean, that sounds like I'm very much like toughen up students, like whatever. But it actually, their educational experience has been very structured. Like, so this is K through 12 too. It's just like, and I think sometimes at Wake, we give them very structured experiences too, where it's like, here are the rules. Here, like we try to explain everything to them so that everything is extremely clear. And so I think it's not their fault. This might be the first time they have to learn how to do this. And so part of our job as instructors is to actually acknowledge that. So when we share our policies, to actually acknowledge that or guidelines. Yes, right. Fair enough. Well, I will have a policy in my class. In my class, I will have a policy. And to explain, and to acknowledge this is going to be different than in other classes. And so let's talk about, but I also think, and part of being a good teacher is to not just have a policy, but to explain why.
Yep.
And I think if you explain why, that can help the students navigate the differences, because they can say, oh, in this class, the reason it's different is because there's a different goal here. In this class. And so again, I've often, I try to find the silver lining in everything, and I've often said that, maybe one of the benefits of all of this is that students are going to learn a lot more about how they learn, because we're going to have to talk to them about how they learn. And we're going to have to say, look, in this class, supposedly every class has learning outcomes, right? This is something you're supposed to do. Sure. Every class says, here's the main goals of the class, these 4 or 5 learning outcomes. We put them on the syllabus. We're supposed to talk about them. I don't know how many people talk about them. If you quiz the students at the end of the semester, what were the learning outcomes of this course? I bet you it would be good. But now we are going to talk about them. We should be talking about them much more explicitly. Here's the thing I want you to learn in this class. And that because of that, because I want you to learn this thing. I often find it funny, the difference between a philosopher and maybe, philosophy classes versus maybe, I don't know, what's a class where you write papers, but it's fundamentally about doing research and not coming up with your own creative idea. I don't know. So some other class where there are papers where it's a research paper, but they're mostly interested in some sort of later analysis.
So maybe a bio.
Yeah, something along those lines. And so there are some disciplines where it's giving me ideas for my topic. What's the big deal? In philosophy, that's the worst thing, because what I'm trying to get you to do is to be able to creatively come up with a good idea.
Yeah.
That's the whole game, is to come up with a good idea. So you cannot ask AI to give you the idea for your paper.
Yeah, that's a good point about the different courses and stuff, because also getting back to using AI, for instance, maybe if I was in a programming class, would be much different than if, I'm in this music class, I need to make a 2-minute song for this.
Yes.
I'll have AI do it.
That's good.
So there's a really good book called Teaching with AI. Hetty Watson, Jose Bowen. And Jose, on a podcast, he talked about, an example from the book, how he has a contract with the students. And he gives them similar assignments first half of the semester and second half. First half of the semester, he says, cannot use generative AI at all. Second half, it's a very similar assignment, but maybe different topics, and you have to use AI. So he assesses, their learning and their mastery, but also teaches them how to use the tools as well. And so I sort of put that in context. You were talking about the paper. How to write a paper without it, and then how to write the paper with using AI.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I'm sort of taking an implicit question within there, which is that do I think that more faculty should do something like that? And I would say only if it's a goal of your class to teach them how to use AI. And I do think students should learn, and again, there's no one way to use AI, as we've talked about, right? But I do think students should learn about AI. I think that's an obligation of universities. So I will say that, but I don't think every class. Just like that's the way that curriculum works. Like not every class needs to teach math. They need to learn math, but not every class needs to teach it. Not every class needs to have papers, but they need to learn how to write papers, right? So I think it's not clear to me that every class needs to incorporate AI.
So I have another question buried down here that I'm going to pull up now. There are some universities now who are doing, it's called an AI 101, which I equate to kind of like our first year seminar. So students come in and one of the first classes they take is an AI 101. Not just, how to use ChatGPT.
It's required?
It is for all incoming students.
What school is it? I'm curious.
There's a bunch, but I know Bowling Green was one that was really promoting.
That's where I went to undergrad. I'm going to go look this up.
Yeah, you should. They're promoting sort of how they think students should use it, but be familiar with the tools. So it's not, let's just say the wild west out there.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine. So there's a lot to say about this, which again could move beyond AI, which is talk about how curriculum works in higher ed and how curriculum decisions get made, which is really complex. And sometimes what happens is you get these quote unquote courses that are not, they're kind of like almost like trainings or things that students do. And so, for example, at Rice, where I was before, I taught a first year seminar on sexual ethics. I teach it here actually as well. And, but it's about like campus issues related to relationships and sex. And so one of my students, when she became the college president when she was a senior, and she was like, every student needs to take this course, right? Now, of course, having, that many professors teaching a first year seminar on that topic is just a lot. And so what ended up happening is they created this like half credit course that everyone had to take that was like taught by staff or adjuncts, and it was like no homework. Because it was so it's not so that I'm wondering how much this like AI thing 101 is actually a real in-depth complex course, because it's just really hard, just logistically, and then also policy-wise to get curriculum approved. So, I mean, you could imagine a world where there is a general education requirement. So general education is like, we take this many divisionals, we have to take this diversity course. You can imagine a world where you could try to get a general education course approved on AI, but then you have to staff it. And who's going to teach all those courses? Who's an expert enough to teach? Because you would have to have like hundreds of courses to do this. So I have a sense that there's more marketing with these schools of what they're doing than that it's actually. Now, that's curriculum. Another thing you could do, which is much easier, is to do co-curricular things. So this is where you could imagine offices outside of like faculty. So it could be like a tutoring office, or it could be IT, or it could be that basically develops courses for students that they can opt into outside of their regular coursework, that they could learn about AI, or you could even make it required in like an orientation session. Make this required to learn these things and learn about policy.
So given that one thing that industry and businesses are saying, they want the students coming into college to understand how to use the I know I'm going to bastardize this word, but the philosophy of generative AI.
Yeah.
Do you think it is the responsibility of the universities to help the students understand how to interact and communicate with these tools?
So, I mean, I don't think we have, first of all, it's worth saying that I don't think we have an answer to the question of how should we interact with these tools is still unclear. So I think the obligation is to have students engage in critical reflection on use of these tools. So it's not like I'm learning Excel, which incidentally, we have no classes. Students aren't required to learn how to use Excel, but like most employers would want them to know how to do it.
If you came out of school and went to an accounting firm, they said, I don't know how to use a spreadsheet.
Exactly. So there are lots of things that businesses expect students to know that we don't actually teach. And so that's another whole conversation about what does that mean and how does that work? But what I think is a more useful strategy is to think about the majors and how the majors and the disciplines are thinking about, okay, so if you're majoring in history, What do you need to know about generative AI in the discipline? Now, if you're majoring in business and you want to, or if you want to go be an accountant, it's up to the accounting department to be thinking about how do we prepare our students who are majoring in accounting for using AI in a way that is appropriate in this field.
So not so much a separate course on it, but just integrating.
Well, and in fact, it would probably be much more useful and much more helpful to think about how is it used in history? How do they use it to think about reviewing primary sources, or how to, now the danger there is that a historian often may become an accountant, right? So like, but that's normal too, is that oftentimes we get this degree and then we're like, oh, I got to learn how to use Excel now. So I'm going to teach myself. And so this is where I'm sure, you know, Jose Bowen often would say this before too, is that the main goal of higher education is to teach students how to learn so that they can teach themselves when they know they have to learn something new. And that can include AI, right? You know, how do they use AI? So I can imagine, I definitely think that we have an obligation as a university to prepare our students for whatever's next after, but I don't know that necessarily is like, we have, because there's so many things that people would want us to create required courses for. Oh my God, there's so many. Like, and there are many who they have to have this and they have to have this and they have to have this. And students already don't like all the gen ed stuff. Like, but certainly there's no question we should have options for them. So if we had courses that a student could opt into in AI, that would be great. But the real challenge there is none of us are experts on it yet.
I love that.
I couldn't sit in it.
Nobody's an expert because we're all like 2.5 years.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the people who are experts are like those who work on like machine learning, but that actually isn't the thing that the students need to learn unless they're in a computer science class. So it's actually been interesting because when we started this, I did a panel. I don't know if you remember this. I did a panel of faculty because nobody else was doing it. And I was like, we should have experts on this, like actually talk about it. And so I brought in like a statistician, a computer scientist, like, you know, and like, they didn't know. They're like, well, we're still figuring it. I mean, just there's so much about like how to use it. Businesses are changing their mind. Like they were all in and now they're kind of like, oh, maybe it wasn't worth it. Like we're hearing that from CEOs now that like they haven't seen the payoff. And so now they're not. And then the question is like, what's happening with entry-level workers and how we train them? And so it's not clear. It is not clear what's going to happen. And the idea of completely restructuring higher ed, I think we don't know enough yet. We should have courses for sure. And we do have courses at Wake Forest that talk about AI, but just not a ton because we're not experts on it.
So good point. We don't know enough yet. There's no bit there haven't been longitudinal studies.
Yeah.
If you listen to all the talking heads and the head of all these labs, okay, it's going to change every industry in the world. And I hate to put it this broadly.
Yeah.
Do you think this is here to stay?
So I take the point.
Is it too much hype, too much that?
Well, I was just going to say, so I take the point of the people who critique these claims as hype. I take that point because it is true that the firm or the companies want it to sound like it's going to like, you know, upend our lives tomorrow.
And these are journalists putting it out there. They have to sell headlines.
Right.
So you want to pull out the quotes.
So I take that point. But I would say often the people who take comfort in point are those who haven't engaged with AI much. The more you engage with AI and do it, and the reason I've done it, I did it because yes, I learned about it and was worried about faculty and how am I going to lead faculty development programs on this. But again, as I shared at the beginning, I'm philosophically interested. I am fascinated by what it means to reason and whether machines can reason. And I'm fascinated by questions of consciousness and how will we know whether something is conscious? I mean, and people sometimes are like, what are you talking about? But those are questions that philosophers still don't have answers to. So I actually have engaged with it purely unrelated to work because I'm curious about what is happening. Like it is to me existentially disorienting that a machine can do those things. And so I think having engaged with it a lot, seeing how, and that's the thing is you have to do it a lot because if you just go, you ask it one question, it's stupid, it's garbage. You can just be like, this is stupid. This is hype.
This is going to maybe be one of the dumbest things I've ever said, but the more
we are recording, right?
That's right, guys. Yes. He's like letting us know.
The more I use AI, equally, the more and less impressed I get with it.
Oh, that's good. That's not dumb at all, actually.
And it's like, because there's things that it does where I'm like, okay, that's kind of nuts. But then like, and I have a specific example. And then there's things that it does where I can kind of see the seams or what have you. Like I was trying to solve a specific issue related to like something I was programming. And I could find only one source about it, like, or one like online like article about it of someone who ran into a similar issue from like literally 15 years ago. And that was what was being pulled into that. That was the only answer I could get, was based off of that same exact result I had come across. So then in my mind, like, I always think of it as like, this is a really impressive and fancy Google or something.
Yeah.
The good point about that is you recognize that, though, and
because you're already
you're still a human in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
You're still staying skeptical and challenging it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just that he's the human in the loop. It's that he had decades of learning on his like, maybe not decades. I don't know. He looks pretty good. So we're all learning on your own. But I mean, that matters. I mean, I think it matters that I worry that if you, with young people who have never learned to sort of think about these issues on their own, and they're only using AI all the time, even if they come at it with a skeptical, like, I know I shouldn't trust it, whatever, they have to have the knowledge to be able to know what questions to ask of it. But I actually think, you said it sounded like the dumbest thing you've ever said. I actually think it's a really, really insightful point. And I just want to say that Ethan Mollick also has another thing that I like, which he talks about the jagged frontier of AI. That is like, it's very strange to talk about how good AI is, because sometimes it's like a super stupid. Like, it's what in the world? But then, and this is why I think the more you engage with it, there are moments where it takes my breath away. And I'm not being hyperbolic, where it takes my breath away how impressive it is. And so I think, yes, I'm simultaneously more impressed and less impressed.
The music generation, I feel like, is the one in video, but I haven't done much with AI video, but I still think it's crazy that I could say, like, make me a song that sounds like artist A and artist B. You can even write the lyrics yourself, and it sounds like a real song. Like, it's the music one, I think, is the easiest thing to like play for, like, to show someone, and they can be like, yeah, that's nuts.
I've detailed many times about some of the cool stuff I've done that blows me away.
Yeah.
But my constant test, like, you bring up Ethan Mollick, he has his otters on the plane.
Yeah.
He puts in the one I keep doing over and over and over again is solving Wordle. I actually did it last night. Well, it's embarrassing how these LLMs can't do that.
Oh, right. And there's different ones that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, but part of that is, what is the task at hand? But I think even these examples, like, the examples are interesting. Writing a song, doing the otter on the plate, doing Wordle. Someone putting on my skeptical hat will be like, this is why AI is stupid, because who cares about those things? But when I talk about it taking my breath away, it's when I'm engaging in a philosophical conversation with it. Yeah. And it is incredibly sensitive and full, and it can understand the complexity of and that's another thing too, is like, I will intentionally, because I'm trying to figure out what these things are capable of. It's not because I'm just like, it's not like her where I want to fall in love with it.
Are you doing this through typing or voice?
Typing. So Claude is the one that takes my breath away the most. So
do you ever do it through voice?
Yes, I have done that too. Yes, multiple times.
Because that'll blow you even
I do.
even more.
The voice mode I use when I'm cooking, because I can't type. And I'm not a good cook. So I mean, again, these are practical things. I'm a terrible cook, and I'm like, and I'll read the recipe, and I'm like, I don't know what that means, or does this look good? And sometimes I'll take a picture, and I'll be like, no, you need to wait longer for that.
That's great.
Like, and it's actually, and I'll be like, okay, can you tell me? Or like, what if I need to substitute this? I'm worried. Is this long enough? And it'll just talk to me as I'm cooking, and give me, and it's like phenomenal. But again, that's an example of things like, if that's all that AI is, of those things.
But when you have your philosophical conversations, go into it and have a verbal conversation.
Yeah. Well, Claude doesn't have a voice, but
it does now.
Oh, it does now.
Very recently, like within the last week.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Like, yes. But do you want to say?
I used it yesterday.
Okay. Yeah.
No, all I was going to say though is, like, maybe it's a bit more cynical or whatever, but my thing is, like, is AI really being that impressive, or is it has the sources that it got, and it's relaying something impressive that someone else.
Yeah. Okay. So you're not a philosophical question, because I mean, I could talk. This is I am most interested in this question, and I feel like we talk so much about like cheating and what, and that's my job. My job is to talk about teaching and learning. But if you want to talk to me about the philosophy of AI, I could, because it's not clear to me. This is a controversial claim, but it's not clear to me that humans aren't doing that as well. We're processing from like. The way that humans learn and the way that humans engage is because of all the things we've learned before.
Yeah, I mean,
so when I'm deciding how I'm going to respond to you right now, granted, I'm not like thinking through it, but my ability to respond to what you just said comes from all that I've learned before. And so obviously I don't think that AI is the same as humans, to be clear, but it's not to me as the idea of how machine learning works
Gotcha.
is not as radically different from how our brains also work. I mean, that intentionally are trying to develop it, like the neural networks. The neural networks are intentionally trying to mirror human brains. Now, again, they're not the same. They're important differences. But I think what happened to me was when it came out and I was like, what's happening? Again, as a philosopher, I was like, this is, I need to pay attention. And everyone's like, oh, it's a fancy autocomplete.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is what this is doing. Like, I am not okay with that explanation. And so then I just took deep dives and reading about how these things are quote unquote trained. And that's not even the right word. Training, I don't think is a right word. We grow them. Have you heard that before? Like, so we're growing these LLMs. So we're actually, and then they are their own thing. And this is also why I really like Anthropic and Claude too, is because their research papers, they also have philosophers on staff who develop the character of Claude, like moral character, like their personality of Claude.
You can see that. You can see I'll use your word, character of the different LLMs. You talk to Claude versus, oh God, if you go out and talk to Grok, oh boy, you are going off some cliff there.
And to bring this back to higher ed, because we could have 4-hour podcasts about this because I'm very, very interested in.
We haven't even got half my question.
I know. But to bring it back to higher ed, what I have said from the beginning is, given the importance of those philosophical questions. So this goes back because your question was about, is it going away? That's how how we got to, is it going away, is that I think this thing, and it's not hype. I mean, again, I take the point that there's hype that happens from the firms, but the more you engage with and think about these philosophical questions and read philosophers who are writing about AI. So if you don't trust the AI firms, read philosophers who are writing about AI. The more you realize this is a fundamentally new thing for humanity in both amazing and absolutely terrifying ways. And if we don't get this right, I mean, I'm concerned about the firms, not because it's just hype. I'm concerned about the firms because this, to me, is so powerful and crazy and weird, and we are not ready for it, that they're moving full steam ahead with no regulation, no philosophical sort of thought about this. And so my thing has always been more so than we have to prepare students to know how to use this so they can get a job. Yes, fine. We need to prepare students for the world that is coming, the moral decisions they're going to have to make, the philosophical complexity of, it is going to be, I don't think it's going away. Let's just say.
Also too, and like this, a really simple thing, because I still see this on social media with certain older relatives and stuff, is I think exposing it to students is really important too, so they could recognize it. Like the number of, I've mentioned it before, the number of people I still see falling for like fake photos. And like, it takes 0.2 seconds for me to say, that's artificial. That too, I think.
Well, but eventually you won't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah.
And it's even more scary when that happens. And so it's really.
Have you seen the new videos that are out?
Yeah.
VO3 and stuff. Those are indistinguishable from real life.
And they're going to be maybe a little bit, but like the slop, the AI slop that's out there, yes, it'd be nice for people to know. But I think there are no more challenging, complex kinds of questions that are coming down the pike for society. So whether this is politicians, whether you're in a nonprofit, whether you're in the private sector, if we're preparing future leaders and future citizens, the most important thing we can do is to help them think carefully about AI. And I don't just mean knowing how to use it. Like, they need to think about what are the moral implications of dating in AI. What are the, all those are shit. So we need to be having classes on the philosophy of AI, is what, more so than anything, in my view.
We could talk for hours about this, but let's go down that path for a second. How do we prepare students?
Yeah. And I do think we actually do have some courses on it, because we have, in the computer science department, they hired an ethicist. So William Cochran, you should get him on here. Highly good. All right. So the computer science department hired a full-time philosopher in their department. So all computer science majors have to take ethics classes with him. And he does philosophy of technology. So he's teaching FYSs and courses on AI, philosophy of AI. Tobias Flattery in the philosophy department does philosophy and technology. I would love to see, my vision is that every discipline takes the strength of their discipline to think about AI. So for example, I'd love to have a history course on the history of technology and the history of artificial intelligence. I'd love to have a sociology course on the sociology of labor, and an economics course on how is AI going to affect labor practices? I'd love to have a political science course on how do we think about power and the distribution of power in AI in like China versus international relations. So it's not a course on AI. It's a course on international relations and how AI is going to affect that. It's a course on and then if students had all of that, oh my God, they could just like.
So beyond, so the AI 101 that I mentioned, sort of when you come in, there's another theory of having what's called an AI plus degree. Oh, so it's whatever degree you're going, let's say you're going for philosophy, you pair it with almost like a minor, but it's AI built in on top of that.
I mean, I'm kind of a radical. Again, I told you before we started this podcast, I don't have a filter, so I'll just say what I think. So a lot of people will disagree with this. I will say this, but I'm kind of a radical about higher ed in general. And I just think we shouldn't even have majors. And so minors, like we have this obsession with like, you have to get all of these credentials and you have to get like all these check boxes, et cetera. And what really matters is what you've learned and that you can demonstrate what you've learned. Because I can give you a list of my credentials, but we all know some people have credentials and they don't know anything. And then other people know a ton of stuff. And so I think companies are starting to realize that and they're doing their own assessments. So they're not just like, did you get all these credentials? We think that that's going to save us is if we just get all these credentials. And so I'm not so sure there needs to be a formal, like it needs to be AI plus degree attached to whatever, because I already think we should definitely not have minors. If I don't think we should have majors, I definitely don't think we should have minors. But we should have the learning opportunities for students that they can pull together. Like I'm the kind of person who encourages students to make up their own major. Like I'm like, dude, I pull like make up. We actually still have that on the books at Wake Forest that you can make up your own major. Now, 2 people are too scared to do it, but somebody could.
I wish I knew that. However many years.
Yeah, so somebody could make their own major in AI. And take the courses and the different, like, I mean, they have to approve
go back and get another degree.
They have to approve it, of course, and you have to have a coherent sort of reason for all of these things. But I do think we need to offer the learning opportunities and we need to provide advising and guidance of how to connect them. If it helps to have some sort of like checkbox thing, fine. But I'm less concerned about that credential than I am with the learning. But I do think having the ability to have a way to have your degree in whatever and to say, I also did all these AI courses, like that was my specialty. You can do that in a cover letter and you can talk about the courses you took. Like that's more meaningful than I got a check. Because what does that even mean? Who knows? Oh, I'm learning, like every school is going to do that differently. It may not actually be meaningful. So we need to help them write their cover letters as well. Now I'm moving over into OPCD's space and I'm not an expert on that. So
we're going to get Andy Chan on here.
Good. Oh, that would be great. He'll be really interesting to hear from for sure. Because actually they've had the question you asked about, like, do we have an obligation to create like a required course in this? They've had that. He's really, really thoughtful in talking about these issues even before AI, because, a lot of our students at Wake Forest would have a philosophy degree or an English degree or a history degree. And he would say that, industry actually wants that. But what they need is just like one little extra skill, like whether it's Adobe or and so he would try to think about how do we get the students to get like level up. So they've got this history degree that helps them think critically and creatively, which is different than some other, a degree in Adobe, right? But they still need to have that technical skill. And so does that mean you do short courses outside of, summer courses or winter, or doing internships is the way to get that skill? And so he'll be, I'm sure, really thoughtful about how do you pair a liberal arts degree with learning what you need to learn about AI to be helpful for your career. So I'm glad you're having me on.
I want to go with one more big topic.
Okay. All right. I'll try to, and you can just cut me off if I talk too long too.
Like I said, I have hours.
Okay.
You're who people are coming to listen to.
This is a higher ed podcast, so let's talk about the schools.
Okay. So Northeastern's made a splash with Anthropic for Education, the UC systems, the University of California systems, have ChatGPT, EDU, Duke partnered with OpenAI to do some of the ChatGPT stuff. Does it make sense for Wake Forest to go down that path of really investing in one of these tools?
So so many different answers to that question. So the first thing to say is that this is not a small investment. I think you have to ask, is it worth it? And I just don't know we know enough yet. It's important to say is we haven't figured out the education piece yet. And I do think that a lot of the complication of the education piece, which you didn't necessarily ask about. It's kind of related to the students being confused, is about human motivation, student motivation. And
yeah, I always question, why are students here? To get a piece of paper and
right. This is the
read
point
or
about
actually learn?
this is the point about credentials. This is why I don't want more credentials. Because if we give them more credentials, they'll try to get more credentials.
If you just want to get a piece of paper, fine, go ahead. Use ChatGPT to write this essay.
But the reality is that there's research on this too, that that's shifted in the past 50 years. So they used to do this survey of incoming freshmen, and they'd ask like, what is your goal for higher education? And one of the items was to develop a meaningful philosophy of life. And then another one was like to get a good job. And 50 years ago, it was like 70% said meaningful philosophy of life. And it was like 30% to get a good job. And now those are flipped.
Interesting.
Completely flipped. And so I do think, and that's the credentials also pushes to cheating, et cetera. But the reason I raised the point about the complications of human motivation is I do think, you might think we can make a deal with what's the harm in making a deal with OpenAI or Google and making it available to everyone? We can explain how we want them to use it responsibly. Professors can make sure that they understand how to use it. But I'm not sure we're all self-regulated enough yet. And so there's a way in which, now they can go find it elsewhere. And that's the argument people would make, is they can go find it elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something about if Wake Forest is investing that amount of money, there's an implicit sort of normative position there, which this is a good thing that you should use. So even if we say don't use it, it's more tricky.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another reason I have a little hesitation.
Yep.
Even though there's arguments that like, well, if you don't do that, then it's only the rich kids that get access to it. And so it's messy. As you can tell, most of my answers are like, I don't know. It's complex, but we have to think about all those things. But now I'm done. I'm tired. AI got stressed, so I haven't thought about it as much as I used to. It was taking over my life a year and a half ago. And I do think there are ways to design it to support learning and based on the science of learning. And that's what it's trying to do with the Socratic method. But it's not going to be perfect. And so it's going to require faculty, if we are going to get students to use these tools, to be really intentional with students about how we want them to use them. And most importantly, we got to motivate students to want to do what their professors, like to trust their professors, that their professors know about learning. And I think there are students, to be clear, there's a group of students who actually hate AI and like are very like annoyed and frustrated, and they're upset that people are using it to cheat, and they also want to do it themselves. Like if you're a student who comes in and you major in creative writing, you love writing, you're proud of your writing.
Hopefully.
You don't want AI to help you with your writing. Like this is my thing. And so I think, and I've heard there are plenty of students that feel that way about their thing. And so this goes back to the credentials, right?
I have theories on that too.
Yeah. Like if I'm just doing it, I don't care about it, and I'm just doing it to get my credential, I'm happy to get help. The other one final big thing I would say, again, to go back to just the bigger questions about student learning and success and sort of philosophy of life and how all of this plays a role, is that I think our students, and not just our students, also us. We were having a conversation, I think, before the podcast about how I guess we did too when we were talking about audiobooks, about how we're just trying to consume as much information as possible, is that I think our culture pressures us, in particular our students, to feel like they have to do everything. They're unwilling to make choices. They're unwilling to admit that their life is finite and they have finite time and that scarcity exists and that you don't get to do everything and you have to make a choice, and that stresses them out. Like you have to choose. Do you want, you have Greek life, you have, internships, you have volunteering, you have chemistry, and then you have church. Like they want to do it all. And there's only 40 hours in the week. And so given that pressure that's on them to try to fit it all in, that's why they aren't learning, is because they're like, if I can just get this done faster.
Yeah.
You need to go slow. Like one of my favorite philosophical, pedagogical philosophical approaches to pedagogy is there's a number of small liberal arts colleges that have a block plan where you take one class at a time.
My sister went to one of those.
Oh yeah, like Colorado College.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
She went there with Jill Tiefenthaler.
Yeah. So one class at a time. And just to re-embrace this, to go back to our conversation about reading, to re-embrace slow reflect, because reflection is how we learn. Reflection is how we learn. So this is the thing about audio too, is I don't have time to reflect. Like they're moving on. They're moving on. Like I need to stop. When I'm reading, I can go at my own pace. So if there's a really interesting sentence, I stop and I think, or I go back and then I come forward, and you move at different paces. And I want my students to be slow and reflective, and they're so trying to cram so much stuff in, they aren't actually learning. And so I think AI, if that's your mentality of how can I cram more in and be more and more efficient, AI is like a drug.
Yeah.
It's going to be a drug. And I'm worried about that. So I'm not sure we should, even though I love AI, but I don't know if, especially for young people, like I think I can be maybe a little, if I'm having trouble with it, but I can be a little disciplined. I don't know if an 18-year-old can be disciplined enough to say, I could do this in half an hour, or I could do this in 2.5 hours. What am I going to choose?
Okay. So with that,
you also have the perspective of when you only had the choice to do it one way.
Yeah.
So and it's tricky for young
people. Yep.
So I want to give you some final words here.
Oh.
What advice would you give to our students, our faculty, and all of our administrators?
Oh my gosh. Would you have another hour? I mean, I'm assuming this is like lightning round. Advice just about AI?
Yes. If you want to impart your life advice.
Well, I mean, but about policy area. So, okay. So let's,
what final words do you want?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I understand that. And it's just the pressure for it to be really thoughtful. I would say for the students, and this goes back to what you're saying too about why are they here, is for them to reflect on why they're here and what they want to learn, and to recognize that if they are in a learning context, which is different from a producing context, right? They have to do the work in order to learn. They have to do it.
That's great.
So one of the things I often say to students is that if you're using AI to give yourself more work, if you're using AI to slow you down, it's probably helping you. If you're using AI to speed it up, it's probably not helping you. AI should slow you down, give you more quiz questions, give you more to think about, give you more to chew on, or different ways of understanding that concept, right? Like, so I have 7 things I need to read instead of 1. That's going to help your learning. If you're using AI to speed things up, it's not helping your learning. So that's what I would say to students. To faculty, I would say, I think the most important advice is not play is not the right word, but really engage with these tools. So I think that point about Michael's, he said it's the dumbest thing he'd ever said, but it's not, is that the more you use it, the more you will see how stupid it is, but also how good it is. And so that's why that advice is relevant to every faculty member. So if you're a faculty member who loves AI, like pay attention to all the ways it fails. If you're a faculty member who's like, this is stupid, engage it more, because you're going to have some moments where it'll take your breath away. And if it hasn't, just keep using it. And I can come and talk to you about how I use it. And maybe there'll be ways you'll see that. And then for administrators, this is hard. Everything is hard. This is hard. I think you have to pay attention to it, which I think many of them are. But I keep coming back to what most schools are not doing. So some schools are ignoring it. Some schools are like all this, like, let's create these, like, AI 101. Let's teach them how to use it. Like it's as if it's this new Excel. I think the space to really be unique is to think about how do we prepare our students to make complex moral decisions about AI. And that entails a liberal arts education, that I understand the history, that I understand the sociology, that I understand the philosophy. And no one has programs like that. But I think Wake should do that. So that's my final words for administrators.
You heard it here from the queen of AI. That went for us. A final statement. I know the CAT has a lot of great online resources. Where do people go to find that?
Yeah. So if you go to our website and then go to cat.wfu.edu and you go to resources, there's an AI tab right there. But it's also technically still go.wfu.edu AI/AI. And so that's just a quick link to get there. And I will say, we sort of took a year off from AI intentionally because we didn't want the CAT to become an AI center. But we're planning. We've had some conversations this summer to at least maybe once a year to do something on pedagogy and AI. And so be on the lookout for that.
And I know you're partnering with the information systems.
That's right.
AI
Yes.
page.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a great page, but you still have a lot of resources, obviously.
Yeah, and we may move them over just to make it easier for everyone to have it all in one place. There's no reason we need to have a million websites about AI, but since we were the first one to build out a page, it's still over there. But yeah, and our resources are explicitly about pedagogy. I also have a page though that's all of my reading lists, which is kind of idiosyncratic because it's just whatever I read. But there's some good things there that you could find if you want to look through it. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for imparting your wisdom.
Yeah, it was fun. Oh, you're making me want to get back into AI and reading more about AI now.
Thank you for listening to the Deacs.AI podcast, where Wake Forest innovators unpack the real-world magic of artificial intelligence through candid conversations. If you would like to reach out to us with any questions or comments, please email us at deacs.ai@wfu.edu. Please continue to join us as we explore how AI is transforming work across campus, one fascinating story at a time, and as we explore and discover the human side of technological innovation.